Hey everyone, I'm Ermysenigma, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another monster analysis. Up for analysis today is Faugnar. For many years, Faugnar had been stopped from hurting others by an anonymous hero who had kept him trapped inside a dark well. But one day, Faugnar found a way to dematerialize his body and become a cloud of powerful, terrifying black smoke. And so with that description, we have an indication that this monster might possibly be placed into the superheroes book, just because it mentions a hero, thus making this monster a villain, maybe a super villain. I don't know, it might be a bit of a stretch, but anyways, this monster design wise, I absolutely love it. I know it's just black smoke and robes, it's nothing too amazing, but at the same time it's super amazing. It just looks really cool. And anyhow, as of the time recording this video, there's a total of 38 Dark Legendary monsters. That's right, 38, there are so many of them. And so I'm going to be comparing Faugnar to those monsters. Starting things off with power, he has a power of 3,454, which actually puts him in 15th place. Now keep in mind, this is 15th place out of 38 monsters, so it's really not that bad of a power. In fact, the power stat itself is in 8th place. And while 8th place may not seem that high, just know that it really is a pretty good power. As for his life of 28,651, this actually puts him in 14th place, tied with a bunch of other monsters like Razorface, Glitch, Vampiria, and Krampus. And lastly, we have a speed of 3,432, which puts him in 18th place, tied with Baltasar. And I should mention that the speed stat itself, 3432, this is actually the 7th highest speed stat for Dark monsters. It's just that there are so many monsters that have a speed stat of 3465. Like seriously, there's about 6 other monsters that have that 3465 speed, there's a couple that have 3476, and a couple more that have 3454. So again, 3432, it's nowhere near being the fastest speed stat for Dark monsters, but it's still a pretty high speed. And I should also mention that this monster's speed stat doesn't matter too much, because the way you use this monster, you're going to use him primarily for defense or for offense, and if you use him for offense, he's by no means your main denier. If anything, he's a secondary denier or a secondary supportive monster, and he could also be used as an attacker, so this monster is very versatile. Especially when we talk about his trait, Abomination. It's the newest trait that gives immunity to possession, nightmares, and bleed. And considering this monster is a dark monster himself, there are so many dark monsters that tend to apply possession, and apply nightmares, and also bleed. And we also see monsters applying bleed in different elements like earth and nature, I believe. So the fact that this monster is one of the first to have a trait to finally counter bleed, that is awesome. And so this monster is definitely a great addition to the dark elements. Of course he can still be stunned, there's plenty of dark monsters that can stun. He can also be frozen, Krampus still exists, but just the fact that he has immunity to possession and to 2 DOTs, nightmares and bleed, I think that's pretty darn good. And I'm looking forward to see what other traits Social Point will introduce that will counteract skills that are currently in the game, to which no monster has an immunity to. Anyhow, moving right on over to the ultimate attack, Hate Clouds, removes 100% of stamina from all targets, heals by 100%, recovers 100% of stamina. His ultimate attack may deal no damage, but it's an AoE stamina drain and it drains 100% of stamina, meaning that the enemies won't be able to attack you. You also get all of your stamina back, meaning that you'll be able to use an attack on the following turn. You heal yourself by 100%, so you essentially get a complete reset while draining all of the enemy stamina. Even though the skill may deal no damage, I think it's an amazing skill. And the only main real downside to this is if you're running your Faugnar as an attacker, he's not going to deal any damage. But again, you're draining stamina, so the only thing you'd have to worry about is the enemy's ultimates. And there's only about a 5% chance of that actually happening, and keep in mind your own monster is going to be healed to 100%. So even if that enemy monster does get his ultimate attack, well, your life is all the way at 100%, so unless he has some strength runes and then really high power, he most likely won't be killing your Faugnar. Although as for your other allies, I can't say the same. Anyways, moving on over to skills group 1, the only skill worth talking about here is Gaseous Fighter. Gives regeneration and stamina regeneration to itself, gains evasion, requires cooldown. And so here we have a self skill that gives you life regeneration, which recovers life by 20% for the next 3 turns, gives you energy regeneration, which recovers your stamina by 30% for the next 3 turns, and it also gives you evasion, which is like an improved space-time, because not only will you block all incoming damage with evasion, you also block all in any effects. You can't be immobilized, you can't be stunned, you can't be frozen, you can't be possessed, you can't be mega stunned, you can't be anything. Evasion blocks everything. You can't be DOT'd, you can't be blinded, dazed. It is like the best way to protect your monster. So the fact that this monster has a self skill that gives himself evasion, that means on the next turn you're guaranteed life regeneration and you're guaranteed energy regeneration unless the enemy monster has a skill that removes positive effects. I think that's the only thing that would override evasion. And so let me just say that this skill is definitely worth running on a defensive build, because this makes it so the AI, if it was to use this skill, you're safe for 1 turn, it gives your Faugnar 1 more turn to use an attack. It's also good to run on an offensive build because it's a self skill, so if you happen to go up against an enemy that has a possession skill that bypasses immunity to possession, then you'll be able to use this and protect yourself on the following turn. For example, if you happen to go up against a Hackster and Hackster uses his hack skill, or if you happen to go against Glitch, who is a dark monster that can do corruption. Both Hackster and Glitch can bypass possession, so this skill can really help you out, if you're slower than them anyways. So if you manage to get Faugnar, I would highly recommend considering this skill for your skill set. Moving on over to skills group 2, we have Anesthetic Stab. And so this skill deals 60 dark damage to a single enemy, costs 31 stamina, it has no cooldown so you can spam this as much as you need to, so a powerful dark based attack that also gives damage reduction, pretty good skill, and you would only run this skill in my opinion if you're going for an offensive build, if you run Faugnar with 2 strength runes and a speed rune or a team speed rune. And other than if you're doing that, I really see no reason to run this skill. It's a powerful skill by itself, but on this monster he just has better things to offer. Hypnotic Robes is the next skill, deals heavy dark damage, may blind target, removes all positive effects from target. And so Hypnotic Robes is a dark based attack that deals 55 damage to a single enemy, it costs 34 stamina, has no cooldown, blinds and removes good effects. I absolutely love this skill. Anything that blinds I love, anything that removes good effects I love. You can get rid of all sorts of buff on the enemy team. And surprisingly again, I don't think this skill is worth running because he has better things to offer. You could potentially run this on an offensive build too, or even on a supportive build because removing good effects is good, blinding is good. But again, just wait till you see skills group 3, which is why I'm not recommending this skill from skills group 2, especially as much as I love it. Ethereal Claw is the next skill in skills group 2, deals heavy special damage, may daze target, gains evasion, requires cooldown. Here we have a single special based skill that deals 50 damage to an enemy monster, it costs 31 stamina, has a 3 turn cooldown, and it dazes and applies evasion. And in my opinion this is definitely a must have skill, especially on a defensive build as well as an offensive build or a supportive build, just because of that evasion yet again. Evasion just protects you. Can you imagine dazing the enemy monster? You reduce their damage output, you reduce their accuracy, and then you're protected from everything for another turn. That is amazing. On top of that, 50 special base damage, you don't need to worry about dealing less damage against a dark monster. And so far we've seen that this monster has 2 evasion skills, meaning that if you run both of those evasion skills on defense, the AI already has a 50% chance of using a skill that's going to protect him. So that's pretty good so far. And the cool thing is, even if this monster were to get possessed, say by a glitch or by a hacker or by someone else that can bypass immunity, that's fine because maybe you'll damage your monster with 50 damage, maybe you'll damage yourself, but you'll give yourself evasion, so you're guaranteed a next attack. Or maybe use the self skill and give yourself evasion, life regeneration, and stamina regeneration. It's awesome so far. And so anyhow, now we can transition into skills group 3, the world of AoEs. And so here we have a dark based AoE that deals 45 damage to all of the enemy monsters, it costs 37 stamina with a 2 turn cooldown, and on top of dealing 45 dark based damage, it also gives damage reduction to all of the enemy monsters, thus reducing their damage output by 25%. And so obviously a skill like this is most worth running on an offensive build, because not only are you dealing 45 damage, not only do you have a pretty high power and some strength runes to boot, but at the same time you're also reducing the damage the enemies can deal against you. A really good attack. It's also pretty good on defense, because if this is the first skill the AI uses, well, once again the damage output the enemy is going to be reducing is going to be reduced by 1/4. Though with all those good things being said about this skill, I cannot recommend it because the next 2 skills I'm going to talk about are absolutely amazing. And so we move on over to Thick Fog, deals moderate dark damage to all enemies, may blind all targets, requires cooldown. Here we have an AoE that deals 40 dark based damage to all of the enemy monsters, costs 37 stamina, and it only has a 1 turn cooldown, which is surprisingly low, but it's an AoE blind. Of course you need to run this skill, especially on a defensive build. If this is the first skill the AI uses, you're good to go. Most likely the enemy skills are going to be missing against you. And of course this skill would also work really well on an offensive build because it's 40 dark based damage AoE, but on top of that you're blinding the enemy. And in my opinion, blinding is better than damage reduction. Sure, it's 5 less damage, but blinding means they're going to have 50% less chance to hit you. Considering skills are already 90% accuracy and 95% accuracy, most often than none they're going to be missing all of their attacks. So definitely run this skill. And lastly we have Vaporous Enemy, deals moderate special damage to all enemies, may daze all targets, gains evasion, requires cooldown. Here we have his last evasion skill. It deals 35 special based damage to all of the enemy monsters. It does however cost 41 stamina, which is pretty high, and like his other evasion skills, a pretty high cooldown, a 3 turn cooldown, but what I really like about this skill, it's an AoE daze, and daze reduces the enemy's damage output by 25% and reduces their accuracy by 25%. And so this is another must have skill on a defensive build, and another really good skill on an offensive build or a secondary supportive build. Honestly, the combo is so simple. Daze and blind, that's minus 75% accuracy, unless it's multiplicative, which I don't know at this point anymore. With all the changes to the game, I honestly don't know whether you add the percentages or just multiply the percentages. But anyways, Thick Fog, that's minus 50% accuracy, and if it's additive, Vaporous Enemy, that's minus 25% accuracy, for a grand total of negative 75% accuracy. Now if this skill would have been an AoE blind plus evasion, it would have been way better, because obviously if you start the game off with AoE blind, well you're not protected, you don't have evasion, you can still be immobilized, the attack may still land. So on the following turn, you're not guaranteed to use Vaporous Enemy. However, if you start the game off with Vaporous Enemy, you can do AoE Daze, you do have evasion, so on the next turn you're guaranteed to do AoE Blind. However, Daze isn't as effective as Blind, it's only a negative 25% accuracy. Nonetheless, still very powerful. The one thing I'm going to say right off the bat is I don't recommend running all 3 AoEs, regardless of what build you use. It's just like having 3 AoEs, it's not really needed. You may be thinking that if you're making this monster just for defensive purposes, it could be good to have all these AoEs, but I honestly don't think so. Yes, AoE daze is good, yes, AoE blind is good, and yes, AoE damage reduction is good. However, you want to capitalize on evasion. If you run Vaporous Enemy, if you run Ethereal Claw, and if you run Gaseous Fighter, that is already 3 evasion skills. Regardless of what skill the AI actually does, it's pretty much AI proof. 75% of the time, you're going to be using an evasion skill, which means on the next turn, you can do something. On the next turn, you can single daze, or you can AoE daze, or you can AoE blind. And even if the AI doesn't actually use one of the evasion skills on the first turn, guess what? By default, it's going to be doing Thick Fog, the AoE blind, though that's a really good way to start off and to protect your team. And this also means that on the next turn, by default, he has to use one of the evasion skills, which will protect him, and then on the following turn, he can either use Thick Fog again, since it only has a 1 turn cooldown, which will reset blind, or he can do the other evasion skills. So I seriously think for defensive purposes, this is one of the better monsters. Now the only thing stopping this monster from being truly amazing is again his speed. Considering he's not necessarily the fastest dark monster, it's highly likely that if you had the same runes and your opponent had the same runes, they're obviously going to outspeed you. If they have Krampus, you have no chance of using one of the evasion skills, and Krampus can freeze you, so your Abomination trait won't really help you out. So there's different ways to think about defense. You could obviously go all speed runes and just hope that your Faugnar goes before the enemy. You can supplement by having your teammates with team speed runes, but of course your opponent probably also has some monsters with team speed runes, so those can kind of cancel out. So unless you have really high level runes and your opponent doesn't, chances are Faugnar will still be immobilized by a Krampus, or by a Harusami with AoE stun, by Mommy. There's just so many monsters faster than Faugnar. So another thing you can actually do for a defensive build is just operating under the assumption that the enemy is going to go first anyways. There's no use in giving him all speed runes, and instead give him a life rune, a power rune, and a speed rune. That way he can deal damage, he has increased survivability, which means even if he gets immobilized the first turn, like what can they do? If they AoE stun you, you can't be stunned until the following turn. If you're fighting against a Krampus, well, you're kind of out of luck there because he can chain freeze you, but at least you're making it so Krampus has to worry about Faugnar, which means Krampus won't be able to single freeze one of your other teammates. But yeah, other than Krampus, I don't really think any dark monster is much of a threat. Like I said, he can get stunned, but after that, most dark monsters that have stun skills also have possession skills, and thanks to your Abomination trait, you can't be possessed. So if you run this monster with a power rune, a speed rune, and a life rune, he's gonna survive the first hit, the first immobilizing, and that'll allow him on the next turn to do either the AoE blind, which helps your team's chances of winning, or it'll give him the chance to do one of his evasion skills, and regardless of which evasion skill it does, it's gonna be pretty good. Because Ethereal Claw is a skill that deals 50 special base damage, so once again you don't need to worry about dark on dark damage. Vaporous Enemy fortunately is a 35 special based attack. Once again, you don't need to worry about dark on dark, and it's an AoE daze. And if you were to use Gaseous Fighter, well, it's a good thing you have that life rune because you also have life regeneration. So once again, if you're planning to use Faugnar primarily for defense, you have 2 different routes. You can give him all speed runes and supplement his speed by giving team speed to the rest of your allies, or you can just give him 1 power, 1 life, and 1 speed rune, and you should be running the skills Gaseous Fighter, Ethereal Claw, Thick Fog, and Vaporous Enemy. Now if you want to use this monster for offense, you have a little more options. You can give him all speed runes if you want to and rely on Thick Fog, however that's not really a main form of immobilizing. There's still a chance you can get hit, so I wouldn't rely on that. And because that's the case, I'd probably give this monster 3 team speed and just help him supplement your main denier, and that way your Faugnar can hopefully go last, and then that way you can end with an AoE blind or an AoE daze. At the same time though, because he does have a pretty good power, you don't need to give him 3 team speed, you can give him maybe 2 team speed and a strength, just so you can deal more damage. This is after all a 40 damage AoE and a 35 damage AoE, so 1 strength and 2 team speed, honestly just mold them to best fit your team. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but you'd pretty much want to go with the same skill set regardless of what kind of build you go. Vaporous Enemy, Thick Fog, Ethereal Claw, and Gaseous Fighter. And even if you're going on a purely offensive build, meaning 2 strength runes and a speed or a team speed, in that case you probably don't really need a Gaseous Fighter, because the only reason you need a self skill is to block yourself against possession. However, if you have your main deny monster mobilizing the enemy's deny monster, then realistically you don't need to worry about getting hacked or possessed or corrupted or whatever, so in that case you could run Anesthetic Stab on a purely offensive build. Overall though, I can't recommend the purely offensive build because there's way better dark attackers, and this monster is seriously better as a secondary supportive monster, or in my opinion, he's just a really good defensive dark monster. And anyways, with that being said, that is going to conclude my analysis on Faugnar, who in my opinion is just an absolutely amazing monster. Make sure to get him if you can. And now I want to hear from all of you guys. What do you guys think about this monster? Do you think he's good? Do you think he's not so good? Do you think I give him too much credit? What do you think about him having 3 evasion skills? 3 evasion skills, that is insane. Imagine if we ever get a monster that has 4 evasion skills. That is completely AI proof. But yeah, why do I keep talking? The analysis is over. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. With that being said, I'm RRabbits, and like always, remember to dream big and pursue your passions.